Pat for Director Miller.
Okay. The regular monthly board meeting of the school directors of Milwaukee Public Schools, please come to order. Please call the roll, Madam Secretary.
Director Baez.
Here.
Director Falk.
Here.
Director Harris.
Here.
Director Phillips.
Present.
Director Voss.
Here.
Director Woodward.
Here.
President Sane has asked to be excused from tonight's meeting. Vice President Miller.
Here.
We have 7 present.
I now will ask the secretary to lead us in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you and any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so, and ask that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during the recitation.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, one of them is yours. This is
Good evening. My name is Judith Sim, the Spanish interpreter. If you need interpretation services, please let me know. Buenas noches. Me llamo Judith y soy la intérprete de español. Si requiere servicio de interpretación, por favor déjeme saber. Le daré un equipo. Solo levante la mano. Gracias.
Thank you. Before we move to our agenda, I ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of Dorothy T. Cullis, a former MPS custodian who passed away on December 30th, 2018. Clifton B. Kincaid, a ninth grade student at Rufus King, passed away on January 4th this year. Marion Rose Guild, a former MPS teacher, passed away on January 7th this year. And Rose Greco, a former MPS principal, passed away on January 17th, 2019. As this is the regular monthly meeting of the board, in accordance with board rules, the board will not take any public testimony on any items during tonight's meeting. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictate that all comments should be directed to the chair. Also, any questions or requests, including those from the public, board members, or the administration, are to be directed toward the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated during board and board committee meetings. Anyone engaging in such words or action would immediately be asked to cease. If such behavior continues, a recess will be called, and anyone participating in those actions will be removed from the meeting before the meeting resumed and will not be allowed to rejoin the meeting. Also, no one other than members of the board, the staff of the Superintendent's Office, the Office of Board Governance, and the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. For our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting esb.milwaukee.k12.wi.us. For our listening audience, at tonight's meeting, there will be filming for a documentary on Wisconsin's Latino community. Now, let us begin. Madam Secretary, what is our first item of business?
The first item of business on tonight's agenda is the Excellence in Education Award. Each month, the board recognizes someone for excellence in education.
So each month, the Board of Directors recognizes an outstanding school student, staff member, parent, or community member for a display of excellence, achievement, or innovation that may serve as an example to our schools and our entire community. This month, the Milwaukee Board of School Directors is pleased to posthumously present the Excellence in Education Award to Sally Ann Winter. Will Carey Robbins, who is Sally's niece, please come to the stage. Ms. Sally Ann Winter is an excellent example of an individual who truly exemplified being MPS proud. Ms. Winter devoted 33 years of dedicated service to Milwaukee Public Schools as an English teacher, spending her entire career at and retiring from Juneau High School. She valued her MPS family throughout her life, especially the close-knit group of faculty at Juneau High School and her former students. Sally loved all types of literature as well as theater, art, television, and film. This allowed her to draw from a variety of sources to engage her students and determine their areas of interest. Her love of travel and ability to integrate current events into lessons served to enhance her teaching and spark her students' interest. Her success as a teacher was in large part a result of her ability to recognize the interests and nurture the talents of her students. Sally Ann Winter was a product of MPS and graduated from Custer High School as valedictorian. After high school, she went to college and earned a master's degree in education. Ms. Winter was an integral member of the Juneau staff and had many involvements and responsibilities beyond her regular teaching duties. She served as department chair, yearbook advisor, and advisor to the prom committee for 2 decades. Sally Ann Winter was beloved by her MPS family, to include students, fellow staff members, families, and members of the community. She was hardworking and considerate of her colleagues, possessed a wonderful sense of humor, and was an excellent conversationalist. The Milwaukee Board of School Directors posthumously recognize and honor Sally Ann Winter for her dedication, outstanding leadership, and commitment to excellence on behalf of the students of Milwaukee Public Schools. Will the superintendent please do the honors? Ms. Robbins, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, please.
We'd love to hear you.
Vice President Miller, members of the school board, Superintendent Hosley, it is beyond the greatest honor for Sally to be recognized in this way from this board. Her career was dedicated to bringing out the individual greatness in each person, and I know she would be thrilled to have that recognized and know that the personal efforts she made to connect with each person were meaningful and lasting in their impact. Tonight, I am here on behalf of Sally's family and friends as part of the community of educators, and wanted you to also know that there are many of us who value the work you are doing and try to extend it and make it meaningful in our own communities beyond just tonight and beyond just this academic year, but for a lifetime. It's very important to our family that education remains a central focus, and I know that people who are here and spend the hours that you do devoted to this work know how important it is and know how much we value your personal commitment to ensuring that all children have access to excellent education. In Sally's memory, we wanted to also say very much thank you for this award.
Thank you. Yes, Director Falk.
Yeah, thank you. I taught at Juneau High School. Sally Winter was my department chairman for a number of years and taught down the end of the hall from me. I was trying to think of some things that I could think about Sally that would be very memorable, and the one thing that did strike me is I can never, ever remember her saying a bad thing about anybody, okay? I just can't. But lest one thinks that she was a pushover, and she was in charge of the prom committee. Try being in charge of the prom committee with juniors and seniors with raging hormones and getting through that year after year after year and putting together a prom that really was exemplary. The other thing I want to say about Sally is that I think she is a good stand-in, a representative of literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of teachers in this system that every day go into school, do what they need to do, work hard, don't complain, try to do the best that they can, and oftentimes succeed. I was tempted to say we should probably, all the teachers should have a big button that says, I am Sally, because really, in a great sense, we all are. All of us that work. So thank you for the recognition of Sally, because I think you're recognizing all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
So if we could give her another round of applause as she's leaving the stage. Madam Secretary, what is the next item of business?
The next item is action on the minutes of the December 2018 special and regular meetings of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Do any members of the board have corrections to the minutes from December of 2018? Not seeing any, the minutes are approved as printed. If there are no objections, they're approved. Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the superintendent?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one report from the superintendent, the monthly report of the Milwaukee Public Schools Superintendent of Schools. This is an informational item and no action is required.
Dr. Posley, would you like to make some comments, please?
Yes, good evening, Vice President Miller and members of the board. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. At this time, I would like to share some highlights from my report. The Milwaukee Public Schools Language Summit attracted nearly 300 people. They were able to enjoy lunch and cultural performances at Milwaukee School of Languages while learning about exciting programs in the Milwaukee Public Schools. MPS culinary arts students prepared and served a delicious food representing a variety of cultures. We learned more about district strategies and enjoyed students' performance by several groups from Milwaukee Public Schools. Students in 14 MPS schools took home free books in December as a part of my very own library program. This literacy initiative is dedicated to putting books into the hands of children in need. This is the fourth year of the initiative in the city of Milwaukee. At Hopkins Lloyd Community School, and an assembly was held so students could meet and listen to an award-winning author read from one of her novels. Mentor Greater Milwaukee was launched as a part of a celebration of a collaboration hosted by the Milwaukee Bucks at Fiserv Forum. This new initiative, which is a partnership with the Milwaukee Bucks, the City of Milwaukee, and the Milwaukee Public Schools, will expand mentoring and support young people. To boost independent reading, MPS launched MPS Reads. The initiative will feature a monthly list of recommended books for all ages and on a broad arrangement of multicultural topics that are meaningful for students. MPS Reads is aligned to the ambitious instruction plan. At this time, I would like to introduce the student voice section of my report. This month, I've had the privilege of meeting with students at 3 different schools: Milwaukee High School of the Arts, Hamilton High School, and South Division High School. The young people I've talked with are full of thoughts and ideas about their experiences as MPS students. They have opened up to me about what makes them most proud about being an MPS student, as well as what they would like to see us do differently. It has truly been a joy and an honor to learn from each of them. This evening, some of the students from the Milwaukee High School of the Arts will provide a report on what they shared with me when I visited their school. Before turning it over to them, I would like to recognize the students. A number of the students from the Milwaukee High School of the Arts are here with me. If you all would stand. Staff that's here with us, parents, and the principal of Milwaukee High School of the Arts, Mr. Larry Ferris. And at this time, with no further ado, I would like to turn you over to our students from the Milwaukee High School of the Arts. Take it away.
Good evening, Vice President Miller, members of the board. My name is Shoshana Rubin, and I am a proud sophomore at Milwaukee High School of the Arts. We are thankful to be given the opportunity to discuss our feelings on a student focus group led by Dr. Posley. The intent of this group was to develop a list of ways in which MPS is succeeding and a list of ways in which it could improve. We had a thoughtful discussion on how we appreciated having a curriculum that supported us in exploring a career in the arts, and how other schools in MPS had even more focuses, such as math and science or languages. We also discussed issues that have impacted our performances, academically and artistically. One example was the idea of expanding J-term in order to accommodate our full schedules. At MHSA, we put 1/5 of our schedule aside for our majors. This means we have limited space to obtain our base credits. Personally, I have to choose between cutting 1 year of math and social studies or science in order to get my required credits, and that is in addition to cutting 2 years of foreign languages. A solution to this is expanding J-term to include gym, health, and economics, or possibly offering a gym waiver to students who log gym hours outside of class. In addition to expanding J-term, we also discussed the need of allowing students to have control over their schedules. Seniors are being put into classes which they have already taken with the intent of filling their schedules. Because they already took the class, they refuse to do the work or even attend the class at all. This lowers their GPA and motivates other students to do the same. A possible solution to this is to allow students with their desired credits to take electives that are centered around their desired careers, such as home economics, which would focus on essential skills. When we say we want control over our schedules, we mean that we want to work with our guidance counselors to set a schedule that works for us. However, when we want to discuss our scheduling issues with our guidance counselor, it's difficult for us to get a hold of them, and when we do, it's either inconsistent or incorrect information. This is due to ineffective communication between our guidance counselors and administration. To increase communication between students and administrators, we need to start with top-down information. At this time, my peer Isaiah will talk about concerns we shared about funding.
Good evening, Vice President Miller, members of the board. My name is Isaiah Jones, and I'm a proud senior at Milwaukee High School of the Arts. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak this evening. When we met with Dr. Posley on January 16th, we also talked about funding. We want to have updated textbooks and materials for schools to better prepare us for standardized testing and our next level of education. We also want to have more funding for upgrades to our building with regards to our gym and our music and art rooms. For example, our gym is too small to play our home basketball games at our school, so we end up not even having any home games. This additional funding will help our sports teams play and compete to our full potential. And finally, with us being the only arts high school in the district, a significant amount of attention should be given to us to fulfill our needs. This concludes our report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Posley. Did you have any comments?
No, we are open for comments at this time.
Okay. Director Phillips.
Thank you, Vice President Miller. Thank you so much for coming here this evening. I see in the superintendent's section of his report, he said that things that you talked about were class selection, J-term, school safety, and funding. So I heard you talk about class selection, J-term, and funding. Can you share a little bit about what you discussed around school safety?
Yes, Director Phillips. Members of the board, my name is Shoshana Rubin. So we focused particularly on J-term in order to accommodate students who would like to reach the maximum amount of credits, so ones that would be for higher up college requirements. So taking 4 years of English, 4 years of science, 4 years of social studies, 4 years of foreign languages even potentially. And with that, with our current requirements, with gym, health, and economics, we have no room to be doing so. Even with taking J-term, which only gives us access to non-AP classes, we don't have room to be getting all of those credits. So expanding J-term, I know that we can't include AP courses because we couldn't take the AP exam, but giving us access to gym or health or economics would broaden our selections.
Any follow-up?
Thank you. That is something that I think that we can definitely talk with administration and think about with our staffing for that, because I know that thinking about summer school and J-term staffing is already happening, I think, right now. And then follow up to that, what are some of the things you talked about around school safety at Arts?
Yes, Dr. Phillips. So we focused on, we don't have consistent safety procedures for the beginning of the days. So we don't have bag checks, we don't have metal detectors. There's not a consistent protocol with our school as opposed to different schools, say Bayview, where you have to go through bag scanners, you have to check your bag, they take your phone, and you go through a metal detector. We don't have any procedures like that, and if we want to feel safe in our school, we should be having a procedure that fosters that.
Okay. Oh, Dr. Posley.
Chair Miller, members of the committee, follow up on two things. The J-term piece, we have already had discussions around that particular piece and looking at offering some of the classes that will meet the students' needs and classes that they can get an advanced start on. So we're moving in that direction. Milwaukee High School of the Arts, as well as 2 other schools, when we have the Safe Schools Grant, was awarded a Safe School Grant, and they work together as a school community to determine the safety of their school, and they were awarded that particular grant, and that's the reason why they have a slightly different procedure in the morning than others, a few other schools in the district.
Director Falk.
Thank you. I talked to the students before the meeting, and because we could hear you practicing in the back, and so I already knew some of the things that you were going to say. And the one thing I did say, and I think is very important for you, is to get whatever you said in writing to us, to the superintendent, to the board, so that we can go through these things, because now we need, this is not the end. You just told us and that we're going to take care of it. This is the beginning of a process. Now, some of the things that you are mentioning, some of the things we might not do, but there are also things that you are mentioning that are of not significant cost that we can do. Some of the things that you're talking about in terms of facilities, you know, we have to have a longer discussion, and we know that there are deficiencies in facilities around the city of Milwaukee in our public schools, and especially a number of high schools where there has not been any updating that has gone on for years. So, but what's important now is you guys got to keep on bugging us after that we get this and say, well, I sent this to you. What are you guys saying? Get back to us. So let's, I think we'll talk to the superintendent about the mechanisms of trying to get interaction on this. But the first thing is get this to writing so we get something that we can look at. Thank you so much. You're the first group to come here that really started giving us, you know, marching orders the way I think we really need to have.
Director Woodward.
Yes, as the director for District 4 and High School of the Arts, I would like to welcome you here and presenting before us. And however, I have not been as visible in the school as I have been for 8 years because of a change of leadership. However, I hope to get back over there and get engaged and be with you to see that you get the things you need and things that you're looking for. For some reason, I kind of lost, when there's a change in leadership, something happens with the connection that you have. So I intend to make sure that I reestablish the relationship that I had built for 8 years at High School of the Arts, and that we do great things together. Again, thank you and welcome you here tonight to present for us.
Thank you, Director Woodward.
Director Voss.
Thank you, Chair Miller. Students, thanks for coming, and congratulations on a really very nice presentation. I don't know what your focused areas are, but there's a full room here, and a lot of students may not be as composed as you are, so congratulations on that. Thanks for supporting your friends as well tonight. I know you have other things to do than come to a board meeting, but it just speaks to the need to have young people involved in opportunities to speak their mind and to share your ideas. So I hope that you continue to do that. One of the questions that I guess I have for you guys is, what are your plans with respect to after high school? Where are you going to go, and what are your aspirations and what you want to do with your life?
You're good.
Go ahead, Isaiah,
Go
you
ahead.
got this.
Just start.
You're good. Go ahead.
All right. I plan to attend college somewhere in Chicago next year, and I want to major in music and computer science, so I want to double major. Some schools I've been looking at have been UW-Madison. Well, that's not in Chicago. That's not in Chicago, but I've been looking at UW-Madison. Schools in Illinois have been Northern Illinois University and University of Illinois at Chicago. So they've been taking interest in me and just hoping for the best.
Great.
Shoshana?
Yes, thank you, Chair Miller. I am just a sophomore, so I'm not particularly sure at the moment. But right now I'm looking into political science, potentially doing community service work in the future, and then maybe doing music on the side because I'm a vocal major. Maybe focusing a little bit of that in the side, but mainly right now political science.
Great. Shoshana had told me she'd sing the national anthem tonight if we did that. But we don't. Director Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just excited to hear the presentation and your talk about how we can use J-term as a tool to make your transition through high school more easy because you'll have room to take courses that you need. J-term was a lot of discussion around J-term when we first came with it, and it's very clear, in my opinion, on how you define how you all would use J-term to get those extra credits, that it's a good thing and that you've thought it out, and how we can take it, your resolution, and move it forward. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Director Baez.
Thank you for being here. We really appreciate the fact that you guys have talked internally about what should happen in your school. You mentioned in your presentation the issue of foreign languages, okay? And I recall that about 2 years ago, my granddaughter graduated from your school, Ariela Baez, and she loved it, the place. And I was also asked on Hispanic Week to go speak to the students in your school, and I did. And one of the things I noticed was the amazing capacity for bilingualism in your school. That there were all these language groups that actually the presentations by the students in that particular instance, it was Hispanics, obviously, were in Spanish, the singing, the dancing, and everything else. And there was such a multiculturality of the students coming together and supporting that. And I'm one of those people who on this board has kept on saying that we need to get good high schools sort of like immersed totally in the idea that the students that graduate from them can be bilingual, that we need more bilingual people in this country, and that your school ought to explore, therefore, with your foreign language programs, with your world language programs, the possibility of a great school like that being also a bilingual school. So I would like to just suggest that so that next time you talk about that possibility.
Thank you, sir.
Not seeing any other comments. Isaiah and Shoshana, I really want to thank you for your presentation. And for everybody else that came from School of the Arts, I owe a huge debt to the School of the Arts because my son also graduated from there. School of the Arts got him through some very difficult years. And now at the age of 40, he is, it created the foundation. He is the theater director for the children's largest theater and the largest theater complex in Austin, Texas. And they train 5,000 students a year in theater arts. And he really does owe it to School of the Arts. So you're carrying on that tradition. Thank you so much. So please give them a hand. Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Board of Clerk, Director of Office of Board Governance?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are two communications from the Board Clerk, Director of the Office of Board Governance. The first communication from the Office of Board Governance is action on a request to retire to executive session to confer with legal counsel concerning strategy with respect to litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved. The recommendation is that the board retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, section 19.85, parent 1, parent G, for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved.
At this time, I will entertain a motion to retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.851G for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. If I could get a motion, please.
I so move that we go into executive session.
Second from anybody?
I'll second it for
Okay.
sake of discussion.
Okay. All right. Do we have any discussion on this? Yes.
Yes, I believe that for the purposes of the audience that we have here today, we should consider the possibility of moving this item to the end of the board meeting. In respect for the large audience that we have here before us tonight, I think that in closed session, we may get a little bit carried away, and it's cold out there.
The secretary, the board clerk, had promised a very quick meeting. It's something necessary. We have legal people here that cannot be here for later in the evening. They can only be here at this time. And so that's why I'm proposing that we go into session right now. And I guarantee to the audience, I will make these folks move quickly. Oh, Director, yes, Director Harris.
Based on what I've just heard from Mr. Chairman and the promise from my secretary, I will move my concerns about the large audience being held over and support going into session.
Okay, any other comments? Not seeing any, let's take a vote, Madam Secretary.
On the motion to retire to executive session by Director Falk, seconded by Director Harris. Director Baez.
No.
Director Falk.
Aye.
Director Harris.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Voss. Aye. Director Woodward. Chair Miller.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes, 1 no, 1 temporarily absent. The motion passes.
At this time, the board will retire to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 19.851G and for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. The board may reconvene in open session to take action on matters discussed in closed session or to continue with the agenda. Secretary, please note time when the board retires to executive session.
7:08, so noted.
We're going to start in a minute or so, if people could be seated. The regular monthly meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors has once again come to order. Madam Secretary, what is the next communication from the Board Clerk Director, Office of Board Governance?
The next communication would be the monthly report and possible action on the legislative activities affecting Milwaukee Public Schools. Mr. Chair?
Is this an informational report?
An informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Does the Office of Board Governance wish to make any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have Mr. Chris Thiel here with us to give us the monthly report.
Vice President Miller, members of the board, Chris Thiel, Legislative Policy Manager, Office of Governmental Relations. Two primary updates, and then certainly would be happy to answer any questions this evening. But as you know, the Governor Evers, newly elected Governor Evers, gave his first State of the State address this week. And we have been tracking the progress of Governor Evers since he has been state superintendent, given the fact that as state superintendent, he has already proposed a budget for the biennium totaling $1.4 billion. In particular, our efforts, the efforts of the board and the teams we work with across the state since June, if not before, have been to very much emphasize the need to increase funding for special education. We were very pleased to hear in the State of the State that the superintendent not only referenced it, but referenced the $600 million of funding that he believes is necessary to get to the 60% reimbursement rate that he's also included in his budget as state superintendent. As you know, and as we have discussed through the special needs voucher program, if you're a student with a disability in a private school, you have a minimum reimbursement rate of 90%. If you're a public school student in the state of Wisconsin with a disability, the current reimbursement rate is 24.5%. So the move to 30% in the first year of the biennium and then 60% in the second year of the biennium puts us on track to move toward that 90% level that as state superintendent, Mr. Evers called for achieving. So we're very pleased to see that. In addition, we have discussed over the last year the Blue Ribbon Commission. This is the Speaker's task force that has gone throughout the state over the last year. Their first public meeting was held on our JMAC campus, and we emphasized special education along with other policy items within our agenda, and then worked with our statewide teams, the Wisconsin Rural Schools, the Wisconsin Public Education Network, WASB, WASDA, to really convey the need of not only Milwaukee Public Schools, but the need of public education in general. Tomorrow morning, in fact, at the WASB convention, State Senator Luther Olson and Representative Joel Kitchens, the gentlemen who co-chaired that commission, will be discussing the report. And we are pleased to say, after wondering what might be included there, that there are some significant increases proposed within that commission report. We have pursued full-day 4K funding for a long period of time. We now see that not only potentially in the governor's budget, but also within the Blue Ribbon Commission report. Increases to revenue limits are included. The 60% funding reimbursement for special education is also included in the Blue Ribbon Commission report. Along with Waiting for Poverty, Waiting for Bilingual Education, and a number of other things. So where we were at a point when the state superintendent introduced his budget, which frankly recognized the need and the need to restore funding to public education at a $1.4 billion total, when you add together a number of the elements in this Blue Ribbon Commission report, the commission is in that same neighborhood. We're waiting for final analysis of those numbers. So very pleased to see that the testimony across the state was taken seriously. I'll add the caveat, however, that the commission report was introduced with a menu of options. So while obviously the testimony heard across the state asked for the needs to be met, and those top-end recommendations are included, there are also options that are at a much lower level. So as we know, the work is not done. The governor has asked to introduce his budget in early March, I believe March 5th. The communication back from the legislature was to bring it in a week earlier. So we will see what final date we land on there. And at that point, we'll have the governor's budget introduced and the budget process begins. The one other note, and again, I'd be happy to take questions, is that this afternoon, the Marquette Law School polling results came out. And as we have discussed in the past, there has continued to be strong support for increasing funding for K-12 education. But for the first time, they added a question asking about support for increasing funding for special education. 73% of Wisconsinites favor moving to increase special education funding, 20% oppose, 7% undecided. So clearly, strong support for something we need to do in the state in terms of supporting not only public education, but funding for students with disabilities in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any questions, comments? Director Bias.
I would like to report that the Wisconsin Association of School Board Members has been meeting here, as many of you know, for the last 2 days, and will be meeting tomorrow again, as Mr. Teo has mentioned. It's important to note that yesterday, the Delegate Assembly of the Wisconsin Association of School Board Members, and Director Falk was there, helping out in that process, voted, the close to 300 delegates to the Assembly voted in support of the idea of moving to 60% and ensuring that that message gets across the state. So they already did that before Mr. Olson and the others go to the meeting tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Yes, Director Voss.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I kind of want to echo that. As someone who has been on the Policy and Resolutions Committee for the last 3 years at the state level for Wisconsin Association for School Board Members, a lot of the legislative agenda was in keeping with some of the things that came up. One of the things that I recall when this bipartisan committee began, Luther Olson had mentioned that he was interested in identifying recommendations, but he wanted to caution with respect to where the money was coming from, I think was what he was saying. And so do you foresee in your role, this is a place to start related to talking about where we can find common ground beyond the special ed through their recommendations with respect to budgeting then within the current legislative, environment?
Vice President Miller, Director Voss, I do. I think it does give us an opportunity to get away from perhaps some of this is a bipartisan issue, funding for public education. We saw that with the passage of referendum across the state, and I think that theme is carried forward here into the commission report. One of the other pieces that we've heard discussed is a return to 2/3 funding, which is fantastic. The question you always have to ask when you hear that is 2/3 of what? It's kind of like the regular size pizza versus the personal pan size that maybe isn't quite as big. So in terms of resources, it's 2/3 of the state supporting 2/3 of the need as articulated by our school district. So the shorter answer is yes. We've also heard, again, just to put some caution out there, but this is where the work comes in, We don't know if we have the money type language. Sure, we can include some of these options, but I don't know if we'll get it done type language. So there's clearly a will amongst not only WASB members, but people in the state of Wisconsin to get it done. And I think they are deserving of it. The rural school districts in particular, and Superintendent Ben Niehaus of Florence County was one of the first districts where they passed a resolution calling for the 90% level. Those rural school districts have been very much helping to lead the charge on these issues, and it's being communicated across the state.
Director Voss.
I'm glad to hear that, because my sense from being part of that initiative, that effort that was statewide, is some of the same kinds of things that we were hearing from the rurals across the state, as well as some of the suburban areas as well. So thanks for commenting on that. It's encouraging.
Thank you. Any other? Not seeing any other comments. Thank you, Mr. Thiel. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one report from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, and that would be the monthly report on activities.
Mr. Trueblood, do you wish to comment?
Vice President Miller, members of the board, Michael Trueblood, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. Seeing a large crowd, probably not here for my report. That report is before you, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I think we'll move forward. Madam Secretary, what is our next item of business?
The next item is action on the reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, student expulsions.
I'll entertain a motion to accept, modify, or reject the reports of the independent hearing officers of the dates and times listed in our agenda. Director Woodward.
So moved.
Do I have a second? And Director Phillips gives a second. Not seeing any comments. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Woodward's motion to accept the reports of the independent hearing officers, seconded by Director Phillips. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Falk.
Aye.
Director Harris.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Voss.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
Chair Miller.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, the motion passes.
We will now have the reports of the standing committees. Since public hearing was given at the committee meetings, the board, as is customary, will not be giving public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report of the standing committees is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 2, action on the request to approve the Mentor Greater Milwaukee Funding Agreement has been set aside at the request of the administration. Item 10, action on a request to approve the Second Amendment to the extension of a lease agreement with Carmen High School of Science and Technology at Casimir-Pulaski High School located at 2500 West Oklahoma Avenue has been set aside as this item was forwarded to the board without recommendation. Item 11, action on a request to approve the Second Amendment to extend the lease agreement with Carmen High School of Science and Technology at the Walker Complex located at 1712 South 32nd Street has been set aside as this item was also forwarded to the board without recommendation. Item 12, action on a request to approve the Second Amendment to extend the lease agreement with Carmen High School of Science and Technology at the Northwest Secondary Campus located at 5496 North 72nd Street has also been set aside as this item was forwarded to the board without recommendation.
Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report.
Oh, excuse me. Do we have any other, are there any other, do we have any other items to be pulled?
To be set aside from this committee.
Do board members have any other items? Excuse me, I'm moving too fast here. Okay, Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Budget. No items from this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do committee members have any items to set aside? Not seeing any. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of Student Achievement and School Innovation. Item 1, action on a request to approve the non-instrumentality charter school contract with Carmen High School of Science and Technology, Inc. has been set aside as this item was also forwarded to the board without recommendation. And item 3, action on an instrumentality charter school petition for the Green Tree Preparatory Academy, GPA, has been set aside as the request was to forward information to the board for its consideration before determining how it wishes to proceed with this item.
Any other items to be set aside by board members? Not seeing any. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. And no items from this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do committee members have any items to set aside? Not seeing any. Madam Secretary, what is the first item to be set aside?
Mr. Chair, at this point, we would need a motion to accept the balance of the reports.
If I could get that motion, please?
So moved.
And a second? Okay, any discussion? Not seeing any. Madam Secretary, if you please call the roll.
On Director Voss's motion to approve the balance of the reports, seconded by Director Phillips. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Falk.
Aye.
Director Harris. Aye. Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Voss. Aye. Director Woodward.
Aye.
Chair Miller.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam, Ms. Phillips, do you have any comments to those people that just were advanced in their status?
Yes, if anyone is here that was up for promotion or appointment, please stand. All right, let's give these people a round of applause. Thank you so much for your service to Milwaukee Public Schools. Go forth and do great things.
Madam Secretary, what's our first item that was set aside?
The first item set aside is item 2 of the report of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, action on a request to approve the mentor agreement for Greater Milwaukee, the funding agreement. This item has been set aside at the request of the administration.
Director Falk.
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, given the number of people here in terms of particular items, I'm wondering if we can take the Carmen issues first, or whether the superintendent believes that this needs to be taken up immediately. And then secondly, it would make more sense for us to look at the approval of the contract before we go through the actual buildings, because the building do not make any sense unless we have a contract. And can we, how
Mr.
can,
Chair?
how can we handle this?
Mr. Chair?
Madam Secretary.
Before the board makes its determination on how it wishes to proceed with respect to the items, the item before you right now would be the funding agreement from the Mentor of Greater Milwaukee. And this is being brought forward to you as a technical amendment. One place in the contract had an extra 0, and so the administration would be asking that the board would approve the contract as it was recommended in the original item, removing the extra 0.
Director Falk.
I have no problems with us taking that particular item first, but then I would recommend that what we do is then go to the SASE report on the request for the contract on Carmen, followed by the buildings themselves.
Dr. Mann.
So dispensing with the item before you, the board would be able to make that determination after dispensing with this item.
Oh, okay, fine, thank you.
All right.
What is the pleasure at this point?
The superintendent, did you have any comments about the 0 that's was added?
Jackie, Vice President Miller, members of the committee, Dr. Mann covered it.
Okay. Do board members have any comments? Recommendations? Yes.
Move the administration's recommendation.
Second.
Okay. Not seeing any further comment. Board Clerk, Dr. Mann, please call the roll.
On Director Falk's motion to accept the administration's recommendation and taking in consideration the technical amendment, seconded by Director Harris. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Falk.
Aye.
Director Harris. Aye. Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Voss.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
Chair Miller.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes. The motion passes.
Director Falk.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to take up at this point in time, if the rest of the board approves, the SASE item number 1, which is the approval of the contract for Carmen.
Is there any objection from board members? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk, let's proceed to the contract for Carmen.
Mr. Chair, that would be the item 1 from the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation, action on a request to approve the non-instrumentality charter school contract with Carmen High School of Science and Technology, Inc. This item was set aside as it was forwarded to the board without recommendation.
Okay, would the administration wish to comment?
Vice President Miller, members of the committee, good evening, and all board members, Keith Posley. This item that is before you is a request to approve a non-instrumentality charter with with Carmen High School of Science and Technology. The proposed contract that is for 3 years and a maximum of 2,160 FTE pupils for the 2019-20 school year and a maximum of 2,260 FTEs for the 2021 and the 21-22 school year. We are happy to respond to any questions that you may have in regards to this item.
Board members. Director Falk.
Thank you. As a member of the SASC committee, I wanted to just go over a couple of things that we did talk about previous to this that resulted in this coming before this committee without a recommendation. I had, the recommendation by the administration was for 3 years. I suggested 2. And the reason for that was there was a significant drop in the school report card. And we were told that that may have been done because of a technical aspect of how the report card is done. I want to point out that I am not recommending denial of the contract because I don't think we can we should not, given the fact that the school report card is not part of the criteria by which we judge. However, I think it is important for people to understand, if I can use an analogy, if you're looking at buying a house and you say, there's no leak coming in through the roof, but you have a couple loose tiles on the roof, I mean, you don't turn around and say, but it's not leaking. I think this is a question that you have to look at. I also want to point out that we have had charters come before us who had poor criteria on things that we are judging, and then pointed out to their school report card, which looks better. So both sides kind of uses the school report card depending upon whether it's advantageous to them or not advantageous to them. The first thing is I think that I would like Dr. Stewart to explain to everyone here about the points that I made in terms of how the report card is put together and the technical problems and how that relates to the criteria by which we judge a school. Because what I want right now is I do not want to deny them a contract, but I am concerned about some, like I said, loose shingles on the roof to see if we're going to have some leaks. So could Dr. Stewart explain that so we know where we're at?
Director, Vice President Miller, Director Falk, members of the committee. Yes, I will be glad to explain some of the details. Again, we need to be aware that we need to base on the contract, and the report card is not part of the contract. Looking at the report cards, one of the things to look at is that the score on Carmen Northwest is an outlier. I believe it's due to the changes in how it was calculated different from previous years. So the state recommends right on the document that whenever you have a change of more than 10 points is to be looking at the report card with great caution in a single year. So that's one thing to take into consideration. And there were several schools that had this within the district. If we're also looking at the component makeup of the report card, Depending upon the grade levels of a school, different factors come into play. So if a school has, for example, K-5, they are going to have third grade reading as a component of the post-secondary readiness, but if you don't have third grade, that's not included. In this case, the 6 grade buildings through high school prior to having a graduation class are judged on attendance, and in the case of Carmen Northwest, the 8th grade mathematics. This year was a change. That it changed because they now had a graduating class in 2016-17. Therefore, this is the first time that they had that metric changed. The difference between the 912 building and the 612 building are different also. Looking at a single test, the ACT at the high school, looking at forward and ACT at a 612. So there, and I can talk about numerous difference in report cards. Looking year to year, while we look at general growth over time and look at categories in report cards, we have to understand that part of the state report card is recalculated annually. The growth is a norm value. Again, high schools don't have a growth factor yet. They will next year. But then schools that have the forward exam do. So those are just a few of the various differences between the two schools' report cards, and our caution when using report cards is to really understand what is measured and what isn't. But again, the report card is not part of the contract, but some of the components, the state test scores, et cetera, those are.
Yes, Director Falk.
I'm going to make a motion, if it may, which is that we approve the contract for Carmen for 2 additional years with annual evaluation. And if I may, I don't know if there's a second on that. Okay. And the reason for this is, again, I want you to understand, I am not denying Carmen an extension to the contract. What I am saying is, we have something going on here. I think Dr. Stewart is probably giving the most likely scenario what's going on, but I want to find out if that's what is going on, and if we have plenty of time to find out if that is in fact what has taken place, and it will be not difficult at that point to get a new contract or whatever if it is in fact simply an anomaly of the way in which the contract, which the testing is going on. And I also would say that if there is something going on, it will show up eventually in the numbers that we do include in our contract. I hope I make that fairly clear. But I'm being a little cautious here, but I'm not denying them a contract.
Do we have and we had a second on that. Okay.
Right.
Director Voss.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I have a question to the administration. Can you just clarify for people who are listening or who might be in the room, what is our evaluation of a 3-year versus a 2-year that's built into the contract already? And I guess my question is to Director Falk, beyond what the review would be as a standard part of the contract, what are you thinking about with respect to shortening that time period? So I'd like to, first I'd like to ask the administration if they can say that, and then I'd like a response to understand what your thoughts are around that.
Vice President Miller, other members of the board, Marla, Brana, Communications and School Performance. With respect to the contract, each of the measures are outlined and evaluated every year, so it's a part of the contract as it's written it's called the Pupil Academic Achievement Report, and so each of the performance measures are either met or not met based on the contract, based on the performance of the school on a yearly basis. And so that is built into the report card the contract as it's outlined. So it's naturally in there for us to be able to see each year how the school is performing.
Follow-up.
Yeah, to answer Director Voss's question, the reason for 2 versus 3 is simply to be in a position where we do not ultimately wait 3 years if something's going wrong. Now, I understand that one can say that we can always pull a contract earlier than that, but I think it puts a little pressure on everybody, the school, the administration, the board, to make a decision on when the second year is coming up so that we can get things, to make sure that things are in order. That's the reason. I don't want to wait 3 years to find out that we have a problem. That's all.
You wanted to follow up, Director Voss? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Miller. So I wanted to follow up on that, understanding now your thought process. So what is the methodology in the contract that's specifically outlined for pulling a contract earlier than the contract duration at this point?
Vice President Miller, other members of the board, Marla Brenau, as the contract is outlined, performance measures, if they're not met, there are termination clauses or measures in the contract that the board has a right to consider with respect to continuing or terminating a contract. So I think as Director Falk stated, the board can at any time, based on a performance not being met, consider that.
Mr. Chair? Members of the board? In addition to that information, the board also has languaging in the contract that would allow for a review to be conducted if that is the board's desire.
Director Voss, any follow-up on that? Getting your
Yeah, I guess,
questions answered?
could you explain what you just said a little bit more?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so in the same manner that Ms. Brunel just identified that the board could, under the termination language, call for information to be brought forward, the board could also ask for a review of any contract at any time and have that information be brought to the board. So in addition to termination, there's another avenue. The avenue would be to conduct a review of the school.
Director Voss, are you finished?
I
Okay.
think so right now.
Director Harris next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my colleague, Director Falks, I want to get real clear on your thinking. Because is it safe for me to think and say that we could also, if it is shown that in a year from now, that this was an anomaly, that we could extend the contract?
Want me to ask?
Yes,
of course.
I want that to be very clear.
But that's,
And, yes.
Madam Secretary, if you could give clarity on that.
Mr. Chair, given the languaging that is in the contract, the board would have the right to ask for a review and then make a determination on how it wishes to proceed with that contract, whether it be an extension or having more information being brought to the board once new data would become available.
And that's even true before the 2 years is up.
Thank you.
Director, well, I actually have someone else. Were you given clarity to that? Okay, no, Director Bias.
My point is that, as I recall the discussion we had in the past about Carmen, we were sort of like concerned about the issue that this contract is sort of like a consolidation of all Carmen schools into one contract. And the question that was raised regarding performance was not about the other schools. It was about one particular school. It was Carmen Northwest. It wasn't about Carmen South or Carmen Southeast. The issues relative to the leases, not the contract, the leases, in the case of those other schools, is still an issue that we need to talk about. Okay? But it seems to me that the performance was focused on the issue of the Northwest. Okay? And I'm wondering to what degree, if we go with your suggestion, we're only talking about that particular case as opposed to the others, although we want to continue this. I'm saying that this discussion is in a larger context upon which we have a responsibility as a board to settle the matter of how we're going to work with non-instrumentality charters and instrumentality charters. Okay? And that discussion is a much broader issue that we started to discuss when we had a special session on charters, as the superintendent well knows, but we really didn't finish. We agreed that night that we need to continue that discussion, and we have not, as of yet, finalized the specifics that this board wants to follow regarding instrumentality charters and non-instrumentality charters and how they relate to the district as a whole. So I'm wondering to what degree we're talking performance about just one, as opposed to all the schools included in the contract.
Director Falk.
Thank you. Director Baez is correct that we have not finished the discussion on that. And it raises the question on, and this is not the only situation in which we have multiple campuses which may or may not be seen as separate schools by more than one charter. And the question at some point is, should these be collectively seen as a single contract, or should there be, in this case, 3 different contracts? The problem is, we as a board have to make a policy decision, and I don't think on this particular contract we should start doing the division without deciding what our policy is going to be. So I think we can go through that policy and then decide, and then as future contracts come up, we make those kinds of decisions as to whether or not we're going to have single contracts or for a group of places, or whether we're going to have individual contracts for each individual school. But I don't feel comfortable doing it now without us making an overall policy decision.
Other comments? Yes, Director Phillips.
Thank you, Vice President Miller. I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to the original recommendation by the administration for a 3-year contract with the contingency of annual reviews of all the schools, and bring that up for discussion with the board.
Director Voss.
Do we need a second on that?
Yes.
Then I will second that. And I would like to speak if I may. So I appreciate that, because that's kind of along the lines of what I was thinking. It seems to me that there's no reason to shorten a contract if we have the opportunity to review. And so I'm in support of that.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Director Falk.
I'll make this brief. The only thing wrong with that is a lot messier to terminate a contract than it is to rework a contract. That's all.
Director Phillips.
Can the administration provide more information around what Director Falk just mentioned in terms of the ease or difficulty of terminating a contract versus elongating a contract, creating a new contract?
Dr. Posley?
Vice President Miller, other members of the board, Marla Brenna, Communications and School Performance. I guess I'm trying to understand the statement with respect to it being messier to do a new contract or terminate. I apologize, I don't understand the question. And so if you could clarify so that we can respond appropriately.
Sure. If I may.
Please.
If you are going through the termination of a contract, you're now cutting off the contract. Now you have to then decide what are you doing at that point? Are you now terminating the contract and it's gone? Are you writing a new contract? If you were simply going to the 2 years, then you are just simply deciding whether you're going to write a new contract or not. I think psychologically, it's a little bit easier to rewrite the new contract, and to be quite honest about it. If you terminate a contract at the end of the, at the end of the second year, you are putting kind of a stigma on the school itself that you have decided to terminate the contract, as opposed to saying that what you wanted to do is make some tweaks to the contract in a new contract. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Director or Vice President Miller, other members of the board, with respect to terminating the contract, I don't think we want to assume that it will terminate in 2 years. So I feel like the process would be the same with looking at the performance measures, ensuring that they are met, bringing that information to the board, and having that discussion and supporting the school along the way. We could do that with 2 or 3 years, and I think we would be fine with that.
Okay, other comments? I'm going to pass the gavel to Director Falk.
Thank you, Director Miller. I'm assuming you wish to speak.
I do. My response to your question is, to your statement, it's easier to extend a contract than it is to rescind a contract.
Right.
That's the bottom line. It's in the politics of Milwaukee and what we do, it's easier to extend a contract than it is to end a contract. So that's basically what it comes down to, and that can be done in 2 years. But I'm going to oppose the recommendation because of, and I would make a substitute motion if need be, if this was rejected. But I don't think that it's appropriate to move ahead with a contract at the Southeast High School at Pulaski without consideration of the issues of equity at that school. And I think that what I would propose, if I were to do this, I would propose that there be a consideration of a contract pending an equity study and a collaboration agreement to be brought to the March board cycle based on a number of issues that are faced at that school. And so that is what, I'm going to oppose the 3-year motion, and hopefully I can come back, but
Okay.
we'll see.
So, but right now, we have on the docket the 3-year motion. Okay. So, Director Phillips.
Thank you, Director Falk. I appreciate Vice President Miller's comments, and I think those things are duly noted. And if possible, to my seconder, I do think that I would like to add a 3-year contract with contingency of annual review, as well as reinstatement of the Carmen Pulaski partnership, so that, from my understanding, when this was first created, we had members of staff, teachers, parents, students from both schools consistently meeting together about school culture and climate and that equity piece. I would also want to see that for the Walker campus in terms of having 2 schools in one building. So I do agree with Director Miller, and I was thinking about that with the lease, but I think he's right that if we have 2 schools in a building, there need to be partnerships that are clearly lined up with both schools in accordance to this contract. So I don't know if that's something that the seconder would
Okay,
Support.
first of all, at this point, we need to find out whether the seconder of the original, your motion, agrees with that.
Right.
Does Director Voss agree with that?
100%.
Okay, Director Voss, okay. And then at this point, could the board clerk give us a sense of what the motion is at this point in time? Because there's a lot being said, and we want to get it in the best words as possible. And then I kind of see the superintendent wanting to raise his hand, and as well as Director Miller. So do you have something? Go ahead.
Paul, members of the board, this is what I've captured so far. So Director Phillips, please correct me if this doesn't encompass your entire motion. I have that the motion is to move approval of the administration's recommendation for approval of a contract with Carmen High School of Science and Technology, Inc. for a 3-year term with an annual review of each of the Carmen School campuses and reinstatement of the partnership agreement at the Pulaski campus and the creation of a partnership agreement at the Walker campus.
Superintendent, I'm sorry, is that correct? Okay. Superintendent.
Director Falk, members of the committee, just want to make it clear that the committee already exists at the Pulaski building, as well as the committee exists at the Walker building. I would agree that we could enhance and do some things to make it better, and we are, the administration is set to do that, to work with the school communities to make it happen, but I just want it to be known that there is a council at each location.
Director Miller, followed by Director Phillips.
Well, I guess our equity committees at these two schools aren't doing their job, because I see, for the number of students that came out from Carmen to complain about room 11. I mean, I've never seen so many students come out about room 11. Come on, you guys. We're having a huge discrepancy around this room, and an equity committee or a dialogue, it's not happening right for that to take place. And the same thing is true at Pulaski. The history of Pulaski is that the Carmen Consortium organized a group of people from Carmen and from the district to go to Houston, Texas, because there was supposedly a model private-public situation where a school, KIPP, along with a Houston public high school, were doing a coordinated effort, and it was a model for us to follow. Well, that has withered, trust me. The model for occupying the same building in Houston has withered significantly. And I have not seen the kind of cooperation at Pulaski that I would hope so. I mean, take the issue of security, scannings, discipline policies, space needed for special education, building upkeep, uniforms, classrooms needed, maintenance costs, water fountains, wrestling space. All of these things are issues. They're not. If I'm getting complaints and it's not even my school, these issues are not being dealt with by the committee at the Pulaski site. And I'm not willing to support a contract until I know that there's going to be an equity study, policy, and agreement that the two schools are going to come together and resolve this. This is about students. This isn't about a charter management organization and a school board. This is about students and the needs of our students in that building. So I'm opposed to this motion without the and a yearly annual review doesn't do it. We've had annual reviews. We have an annual review. It's consistent. I cannot support it under these terms.
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Chair Falk. I would agree with I would agree with Vice President Miller based on testimony and feedback that we've gotten from parties at both Southside campuses. It doesn't appear that there are functioning committees and where there's collaboration happening. So I agree with you. That's something that we heard. I guess that the reason why I want us to consider a 3-year contract is I don't want to continue to make half of these campuses feel like their school is being placed on hold. So when we're talking about all of the students, how do we continue to have this dialogue, not when we're renewing contracts, but every month? Collaboration isn't happening, and we need to make that happen for these schools to be successful. So I don't feel like my motion is in contradiction with Vice President Miller. I think that it's in support of some of the things that we heard. And I also think that part of the issue and the anxiety around this contract is not understanding what metrics we have in place, not understanding how is the board actually keeping our schools accountable, our communities accountable. And I would ask that the board meet around charter school policies as soon as possible so that we can clarify that for the public and that the public can hold us accountable for what contracts we're putting out and how we're keeping those things accountable.
Director Voss.
To Director Phillips' point and Director Miller, my understanding of the motion at hand and the reason why I'm in support of it is that I want to see that strengthened as well. I mean, it's clear with all the testimony, with all the discussion that we've had, that there are things that are not working in the partnership currently, even though we may have an ongoing committee. So what I would really like to hear is that from an equity lens, which we've also passed a resolution around, looking at equity across our schools, that will be strengthened in a meaningful way. And so despite the fact that we have a committee that's been ongoing meeting, I feel like, to Director Phillips' point, we absolutely need to strengthen that initiative. And so I want to hear, I guess, from administration that there's a plan for that and that will be something that has been significantly worked on moving forward.
Dr. Posley.
Vice President Miller, members of the committee, that most definitely is something that we will continue to work on. That has already begun. I have had conversations with leaders, both leaders from both school communities, and that is something that we are looking at. I'm the first to say my words was to clear up that we do have a committee that is currently meeting as we speak, as we move forward. But I'll be one of the first to say that we are not getting the results that we want to see. And by all means, we are excited to be able to support through the equity lens to pull together and work with both school communities to get to a place that we are working like a well-oiled machine.
Director Baez and then Director Falk.
Yeah, it is precisely because of what we have discussed relative to equity and relative to the non-functioning of building committees that we need to deal with the issue of 2 or 3 years, just so that we can get some clarity on this. It seems to me that the issue of sharing buildings all over this country between public schools and charters continues to be an issue all over the place. This is not new. This has been going on for a very long time. There have been huge demonstrations in some cities about this kind of stuff. And we have sort of like tiptoed around some of that in our discussion, and we haven't really gotten to the meat of it. I sort of like want to make clear that the issue here is not the contract per se. The idea that we need to have charters and that we need to have instrumentality charters that work well with our public schools and that work well with our instrumentality charters. I am very supportive of the idea that instrumentality charters that work well, that do well for our young people, are the kinds of institutions that we need to have good partnerships with. Okay? But those partnerships and the specifics of sharing buildings are at the heart of some of the issues that we have been dealing with here. We received testimony, we heard from all sides, we received memos, we received letters. I received a ton of letters from young people about this stuff. And you know, I'm sort of like touched by the fact that, yes, there is mobilization, but that mobilization is on all sides, and people cannot assume that it's only on one side, okay? The issues of clarifying the specifics of how we rent, of how we develop leases, of how programmatically we deal with each other are really, you know, in conflict here. They seem not to be very clear. And if they're not very clear, how do we get at that? How do we provide, you know, maybe a 2-year contract with the appropriate mechanisms for people to discuss and talk and develop better mechanisms for doing things and ensuring a clear-cut sort of like separation of how we share space and all of those kinds of things and the academics, et cetera, so that we bring to a minimum these kinds of conflicts. I don't think that we're going to really get rid of all conflicts. There's always going to be perceptions of issues and problems. But some of these issues are very serious. Some of these matters that have come to us in Pulaski and Alba particularly, not the other schools, but in those 2 schools in particular, we have heard from both sides. And what we have heard, you know, informs how we have to behave. Okay? So I don't want people to think that we don't believe that we need to do some kind of contracting, okay? And that contracting needs to be very clear and very specific on how we do it, because that goes to the responsibility we have in this community as a whole, okay? But how we do it, the specifics of how we do it, I think need to be at the heart of the decision that we make here tonight, okay?
Okay, Dr. Falk.
Thank you. When I initially suggested 2 additional years, my reasoning was primarily on the issue of looking at Northwest and seeing if that was an anomaly. What has happened here tonight, however, in the discussion of how the schools are working together raises an additional reason why it should not be 3 years and 2 years, but rather additional 2 years. And the reason being is, I want you to think in terms of what happened, would we even have discussion tonight if Carmen had another year to go on their contract? And the answer would be no, or very unlikely that we would have that discussion. So I don't want to wait for that discussion to come. I think if we force the issue to have a discussion in 2 years, we will put everybody on notice that we've got to settle this much sooner. Let's, you know, I don't want to get a situation where people are saying well, we got a couple of years before we really have to get serious about the issues here. I want to get it serious right away. So I'm going to vote against the motion only because of the fact that I want it to go down to 2 years, but I support all the other provisions and discussion that is being raised by everyone else regarding the issues of equity and how we deal with that.
Any other comments?
Yes.
Director Baez.
I wanted to follow up on Director Phillips' suggestion that we really need this discussion on charters as soon as possible. It took us a very long time to get the first discussion going because of schedules and all kinds of things. But it seems that the situation that we're in right now has a certain urgency to it, and that discussion has to happen now. It can't continue to be postponed. And I'm talking within the next several weeks, where we do talk about both the contractual process and the lease process, okay? Director Falk has raised in his first intervention the issue of the performance of Northwest. And I believe that's something that we definitely need to look through the evaluation process to see what kind of data that bears. and so that we're better informed in terms of contracting with each other. But the issues in Pulaski and Walker, okay, are issues that pertain not only to the contract. The contract then that we make should inform how we proceed with the issues of the leases in that particular case. We have people on both sides that have raised a lot of issues with us, okay? And we would be remiss if we do not show that we are equitable in how we listen to it. There are things that one group versus the other will push stronger on, but I don't think that we're at a point right now where we can, with ease, make that decision that we are going in one particular way and not the other, okay? I think that we need time to do this well, okay? I support the idea of a 2-year contract because it gives us the time to do that, okay? And I would urge my colleagues to think about that.
Director Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I second the motion for the 2-year contract, frankly, because I want Carmen to have a contract. And if it's a 3-year contract or a 2-year contract, I'm absolutely convinced that the equity issue can be resolved in the 2 schools in Pulaski that share the Pulaski building can work together. And I say this based on my experience with working with Carmen and Pulaski when they brought the initiative together, the work that they did with the students, the Carmen students and the Pulaski students working together to make that program a reality. I saw absolute cooperation between the 2 entities. Granted, we may have taken a step down or 2 in that area, but I'm convinced, based on the work that was done initially, that Carmen and Pulaski can come back to where they were, and that the Blacktino initiative that was started with the students at Carmen and Pulaski was an initiative that the students put together and did in order to bring the African American and the Latino students together so they could understand each other's relationships to each other. So that's part of the work that was done to bring this initiative and to bring this institution into being. So based on the conversation here I've heard tonight, it's obvious that, and I'll just say I'm going to go with the original motion made by my good friend, Director Falk, on the 2-year contract, because I know that Carmen and Pulaski can work this out, as well as the other schools that are being shared, that are sharing buildings, because it's in our interest as a district to do what's right toward our children, regardless to who they are, what schools they're in, as long as they're our children, and all children in Milwaukee are part of our family. So thank you, and with that, I pass.
Any Director Baez.
Yeah, I just want to make another point. Look, this issue of, particularly in Pulaski and Walker, has really divided our Latino community, and it shouldn't. It should not. I represent that area, and I hear it from all sides. I hear it from the people in one school and the people in another. I hear it from parents. I hear it from students. And I don't think that in any way we should send the message that the resolution of these specifics relates to that larger idea of communities working together to make things better, okay? I think we need to do that, that young people particularly who are at Carmen have as much an obligation as the parents that are at Araba, for example, to work with the superintendent and his team to resolve those issues of sharing. And when sharing cannot happen, that we look at other alternatives. We have to. Sometimes these things happen. And when they happen, they may be unfortunate, but they are more an issue of adults working with adults than they're about young people working with young people, okay? And so I want us to caution that in no way the resolution of this situation right now should be viewed as final in any way, but it should be viewed as a means for us
Chair?
to really do our job, okay? I'm sorry, did I extend myself?
We're talking about the contract.
Just want to be sure that we're talking about.
I am talking about the contract,
Academic
too.
programming at Carmen High School of Science and Technology, Inc.
With all due respect, Clerk, I'm talking about the contract too. We cannot act on contracts absent an understanding of the context, okay? And if we don't do that, okay, we are also being remiss with our communities, okay? So I cannot really do a 3-year because of all those circumstances. I would think that a 2-year puts us in the direction of moving in this, okay?
Any other comments? Director Phillips?
Thank you, Chair Miller, and I appreciate the discussion from my colleagues. From my understanding, from what's been said, there would not be a support for my motion, so I'm going to withdraw my substitute motion. And I would ask that the original motion that Director Falk be put back on the floor, and with that friendly amendment of the reviews as well as the building committees.
If I may?
Yes.
I think, and I did, Director Harris was the second, and therefore, I'm assuming what we're suggesting is we pull over the other language that Director Phillips had in terms of review, et cetera, and so now it says 2 years rather than 3. And I want to know if Director Harris agrees to that, and then if that be the case, then that would be the motion.
I would accept the amendments to the
Okay.
motion made from Director Phillips.
Okay, so that is withdrawn? The substitute amendment? Okay, I'm going to pass the gavel. I'm going to make a substitute amendment. Motion, excuse me?
Are you making a substitute or not amendment? Okay.
Motion.
Okay.
So my motion is Director Falk's motion, with one exception. And that's that at the Southeast High School Pulaski campus, that we not go further until there's consideration of, until, do not go further with a contract pending an equity study and collaboration agreement to be brought back to the board cycle in March. So it's
Okay.
all of the above with the exception of that campus. And so the whole idea will come back in the March board cycle.
Okay, we need a second. Is there a second to that motion?
Not seeing any? Okay. Director Falk.
Yes, I would suggest that we can pass.
Board Clerk.
Mr. Chair, just for clarity for our audience and for those listening, given that there was not a second, the motion that is before you would be to move approval of the administration's recommendation for approval of a contract with the Carmen High School of Science and Technology, Inc. for a 2-year term with an annual review of each Carmen school and reinstatement of the partnership agreement at the Pulaski campus and the creation of a partnership agreement at the Walker campus. And that would be the motion by Director Falk, seconded by Director Harris.
Correct. Any further comments? Madam Secretary, please call the, Dr. Posey, you had something to say?
Vice President Miller, members of the committee, that was not the administration's recommendation, so just wanted clarity.
That's right.
Mr. Chair.
Understood. It wasn't. Understood.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the administration is recommending the contract. The board has altered the terms of that contract from a 3-year to a 2-year and added contingencies around reporting and the partnership work.
Director Falk.
Yes, I think Director Miller has some good ideas. We can pass a 2-year contract and the administrations can still go and implement that. I don't know that we need that in a motion, but the reality is if the administration is not getting a sense of what we see as problems, I mean, then we got problems, right? Okay, so I think we worked this out, okay.
Any other comments? Director Voss?
Thank you, Chair Miller. I just want to say, the reason why I did not support a second is that I don't know that was fast, that was possible, that quickly. And so, I guess I would like to ask administration how you plan on, without having that in a motion, if you have specific thoughts around equity, and what you would do without that in a specific motion.
Vice President Miller, members of the committee, one of the things that we're going to do is sit down with our team here at 52nd Valete around this whole thing around equity, look at that from Lynn's standpoint, and also go and meet with both school communities, and also look at and see, do we need to bring outside experts in to work along with us through this process? So we want to survey the landscape first and be able to come back with recommendations of where we need to go and how we need to get there. And we will be more than happy to entertain any information that you may provide us. So when we sit with the school communities, as well as the team here at Central Office, so we can get on the same page.
Director Voss?
And I just, thank you for that. And the reason why I ask that specifically is that I want to be sure we do this right. Because if this stuff keeps coming back, which we've heard it has through the years, like, I want to be sure that we have a process that's not rushed, that's something that is meaningful, and is going to be a resolution, because our children need to have the ability to not get caught up in these different dynamics and to get the education that they need.
Director Baez?
I just want to make sure that, I think that the administration gets the message, and the discussion that we've had has been significant. If this administration will come back with a contract renewal that sort of like ignores what we're talking about, you know that we're going to go through that again. It's not a good thing. It's not good for anybody. But the other thing is that because we have not reached clarity on how we're going to deal with the issues of charters, we cannot ignore the fact that that's in the way, okay? And that's why we need that discussion as soon as possible. But I also want people to know that our delay in dealing with these issues is that a district this size is not just about charters, and it's not just about buildings, and it's not just about the kinds of things that we're dealing with right now. There's a ton of things that we've been dealing with, and particularly as it relates to how the state funds us, okay, and the money that we get. And that's where we're involved in a bunch of other things. So I would suggest that if we go with this resolution, it is a function of how we need to make sure that we get the time to have the appropriate attention to the issues, and that the superintendent and staff really look at the various submissions that have come to us from all different sides, and, you know, proceed with the appropriate meetings, et cetera, that at some point we get a report back on what has happened, what has transpired, and how all of that can inform the discussion on charters that we have, okay? And how do we proceed from now? So I think this is a medium. This is a way of getting there, but I am not ignoring what Director Miller said. There are issues of equity that have to be given very serious attention. And the attention that those equity issues take are going to help us better understand how we proceed next. Because when I look at the issue of leases, the leases that we're talking about need to follow the contract. need to be consistent with what we're talking about in terms of these contracts. And if there are issues that have come to us regarding the use of space in the buildings, those are significant, and we cannot ignore them.
I'm passing the gavel.
Director Miller.
I guess my issue is I haven't been proven to trust the process. I've watched what's gone on since I've been on the board at the Walker Complex and have been distressed about it on a yearly basis. And I look at the process that's gone on at Pulaski, which has only been a few years. Just take the issue of special ed. One school is 11% special ed, the other school is 28% special ed. Has there been a discussion about how to accommodate that difference in terms of how you organize your programs and help each other out? I would bet that there's not a lot of help for Pulaski special ed work. I would bet that's the case with having such a huge population of special ed. And it really comes down to room space, the issue of how you organize room, because you need a lot more room when you have a lot more special ed in your programming. I'm very nervous about the process. And we're putting this on Dr. Posley. This is not his creation. This was created by someone else, okay? And created under a different administration. So I'm alarmed that we're not pushing this harder. And long-term, fine. But I need to know that there's going to be some real adjustment in the next month, next 2 months. And I'm not feeling that.
Is there any other comments? Director Phillips.
Thank you, Chair Falk. I would ask that as we continue forward with the partnerships, that you would include Vice President Miller and I to all of the meetings at the Pulaski campus, and that you also include Director Baez and Vice President Miller to the ones on the Walker campus, because his sentiment is duly noted, and I think he has every reason to feel the way that he does, and we have to do better and prove it in a very quick time frame.
I'm going to ask the board clerk, if you include 3 board members, are we creating a quorum issue?
No. It's only 2.
Oh, because you're mentioning Director Baez, yourself, and Director Miller? Yeah. I just want to make sure.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, if I'm understanding Director Phillips, what she is asking is that when there is a school-based meeting, that the vice president of the board and the representative of that school would accompany, would be invited to that meeting, that individual meeting. So that would constitute only 2 board members, no quorum violations.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, Superintendent?
Just a quick comment.
Well, Superintendent, then I'll move to you.
Director Falk, members of the committee, I want to share that the administration is very passionate about working to resolve any issues or matters that we have, because we want to ensure that all of our young people get a quality education. And we are indebted to do anything that we possibly can to support that. We applaud the efforts of the support of board members at those particular meetings. And also to know if it's a situation that we need to go outside of our district to make it happen, we look forward to doing that as well. And so, but we want to come back with a win-win situation for young people.
Director Baez?
I just wanted to stress the urgency of this. I share Director Miller's concern that the process has not really rendered the kind of clarity that we're looking for. And with a new superintendent on board, I am hopeful that we will be able to work together to make that happen, because Director Miller is right. This started way before that. But there's a certain urgency to resolving this. And if I go over the 2 years, is because I know how time flies, okay? It goes by very, very fast, but we need to make sure that in that process, we hear all these specifics about the process, okay? And that we wade in how we're going to help resolve the situation. It has to be resolved for everybody involved, okay? And it has to be resolved in such a way that young people are not hurt in the process. adults are going to have to work this out. It's as simple as that. Okay?
Is there any other comments? Seeing none, could the board clerk repeat the motion? And then we'll have a vote.
On Director Falk's motion, seconded by Director Harris, which moves approval of a non-instrumentality charter school contract with Carmen High School of Science and Technology, Inc. for a 2-year term with an annual evaluation of each Carmen school to be brought to the board, and that the partnership agreement at the Pulaski campus be reinstated, and that there be creation of a partnership agreement, and that, can't read my own writing, and that the creation of a partnership agreement be developed at the Walker campus.
Okay, call the roll, please.
On the motion as read, Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Falk?
I'm
Oh, I'm
Sharing.
sorry. Director Harris?
Aye.
Director Phillips?
Aye.
Director Voss?
Aye.
Director Woodward?
No.
Director Miller?
No.
Chair Falk?
Aye.
That's 5 ayes, 2 noes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
Mr. Chair, given the size of the audience, are we able to take a quick recess
Please.
to ensure that the item can be heard?
Please. Note the time, please.
So noted.
Maybe sleeping when I get home.
I know.
Sassy.
I know. But, so I want to do this. Let's just get this out of the way. Go to all other items. Okay, so what would be the next, I'm just going to say what's, you, everybody back? Yeah. Who is? All right, we'll reconvene this meeting. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next item set aside is item 10 of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Action on a request to approve the Second Amendment to extend the lease agreement with Carmen High School of Science and Technology at Casimir Pulaski High School, located at 2500 West Oklahoma Avenue. This item has been set aside as it was forwarded to the board without recommendation.
Would the administration like to speak?
Yes, Vice President Miller and members of the board, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to provide additional information regarding the lease item. Per the request, we provided follow-up information that you received prior to this meeting. I would like to provide a brief overview of this information. On building improvements, at the committee level, there was testimony and discussion regarding building maintenance and improvements of the Pulaski buildings. To address the concern expressed, a site visit was conducted by district staff on January 18th of 2019. At that time, it was confirmed that the entire building is well maintained. In addition, it has been confirmed that Kerman has paid for all building improvements throughout areas of the leased space, totaling about $300,000. Improvement for the Pulaski space totaled $1,768,000, basically $1.7 million. In April of 2018, the board approved a construction for $1.2 million for work complete last summer for converting classrooms for educational programming needs, science classrooms and storage, as well as workspace created, specialized services classrooms, and wrestling space. Additional work completed in the Pulaski area during the summer 2016-2017 totaled $568,000. Classroom conversions made was the main office, office improvements, and refresh work. We would like to suggest that for the proposed lease at the Walker site, that the the current lease be allowed to continue until it expires on.
We
Dr. Posey?
are currently on the item that talks about the Pulaski campus.
All right.
Just Pulaski.
Pulaski.
So you started to move over to, Dr.
yeah,
Posey,
on the
move over to
Pulaski
Walker,
campus.
so we're just talking Pulaski at this point.
Pulaski campus, all right. That completes my report.
Thank you.
We are ready to entertain any questions that you may have.
Okay, board members, Director Falk.
Well, the one obvious thing that we have to change is the terms. Right now, it will be terminated, it says June 30th, 2022, and therefore we will have to modify that to 2021. Now, I don't know if there are other areas in which board members want to change that, but before we go through that, I think we do have to cut out that 1 year.
Okay. Did you want to respond to that, Dr. Posley?
Vice President Miller, members of the committee, we are in total agreement with that.
Other board members? Well, I'm going to pass the gavel, not seeing any other. So I'd like to,
Director Miller.
yeah, if I could, Dr. Posey, so here's my concern. I raised this issue of just say special ed and the need for space, and not confident at this point that that it is what it should be. What recourse is there for changing room designations at this point? I mean, if we adopt this lease, that designates rooms. So how do we improve if there needs to be improvement? And I'm going to rely on the committee that's been set up through the contract to give leadership to that. But how do we resolve that?
Superintendent.
Director Falk, members of the committee, one of the things that we have been, number one, all of the rooms are fully utilized at this time. So this will complete all of the rooms there. However, with the work that we're going to do from the equity standpoint, this opens up an opportunity that the school community could have a discussion around that particular piece and see if there are rooms that we need to switch or whatever the situation may be, and it will just be an amendment to the lease.
Director Miller, follow up?
So you're suggesting that as we move forward, there could be amendments to the lease to take this into account. And well, let me get that, because I want to make a point. I want to make a point here, if I could. If you could respond to that, Dr. Posey.
Yes, Director Falk, members of the committee, yes, that is correct. We could look at that particular piece that way.
If I could do a follow-up, because, I mean, in all honesty, the original view that was presented was that there would be collaboration like what supposedly happened in Houston on every level, including fundraising, which of course KIPP in Houston was doing huge fundraising nationally. I would bet there hasn't been any cross collaboration on fundraising, but maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong at the Pulaski building. But I'm very concerned that is Pulaski going to help educate our 28% special ed students on the Pulaski side? I mean, that's what collaboration is. If you're just going to cohabitate, well, that's one thing. But actual collaboration means you're trying to figure out how to best educate all the children, all the students, because they're not children, they're high school students, they're young adults in that building. And I've never felt that, but, maybe it's not one of my schools, I'm not in that building very often, but that has to be the culture. That has to be the culture. It has to be student-centered, and so that's my concern.
Director Falk, members of the committee, and that is something that we could look at is space utilization within the building as well when we visit the lens of equity, but we would have to work as a team, that's both school communities working together, collaborating together on a solution to the problem.
Thank you.
Okay, if I can get an understanding of where we're at then, my understanding would be that first of all, we do not have a motion, but the administration is recommending what is here before us with the modification in the terms of termination on June 30th, 2021, rather than what was initially written. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
members of the board, the administration's recommendation is for a 3-year contract term. Any modifications would need to come through a
Okay.
motion from the board.
So if there is going to be a motion, it will have to be done by a board member, correct? Okay.
That is correct.
Director Baez.
I so move that we make the appropriate changes in the contract related to the building, the lease, to 2 years, we reduce it to 2 years, consistent with the prior discussion that we had.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there additional discussion? Is there additional,
There's
Director
additional
Baez?
discussion. We have received a bunch of stuff related to the equity issue in this school. And I'm sort of like concerned that, yes, we put, 2 years in terms of the contract, in terms of the lease. But some of the issues that have been raised by Pulaski staff and by mostly Pulaski staff, are issues that require like immediate attention, okay? Equity issues that require that we find some kind of a solution now in the process of working out lease agreements and things like that, because we may be approving here this list, but we're also showing our frustration with the process, our urgency to try to get some things done. If some of those equity issues that are impacting the lease agreement right now, at this moment, can they be dealt with certain immediacy while we look at the larger picture there? And can the administration come back to us with some kind of a recommended approach on how we proceed with this? I ask the administration.
Superintendent.
Director Falk, members of the committee. The answer is that we're going to hit the ground first thing tomorrow morning, working on solutions to issues that were raised tonight. And yes, we will be more than happy to come back to the board to provide preliminary information.
Yes.
Follow-up. You mentioned in your prior comments that the school community will have a discussion. Are we talking about the school community of Carmen, the school community of Pulaski, or we're talking about everybody? Could you explain, elaborate on that? Because I don't think we have a school community per se.
Director Falk, members of the committee, absolutely, we're talking about all school communities, as well as the central administration, as well as the 2 board members that have been, that is going to serve on those committees as well.
Director Voss.
Thank you, Chair Falk. I just wanted to make a mention that some of the feedback and the commentary that we've gotten related to equity is related to investment in the building. And I know that there was a mention of private investment from Carmen for their own upgrades on their side. I just want to acknowledge that if we're looking at it the same way, according to equity of investment, that will take some additional investment approval, because that was not probably part of the original budget, but we are in a budget proposal cycle, and so if there's a significant dollar that goes along with the equity, making things equitable within the building, I just want to acknowledge that there was a lot of commentary around investment at that facility, and I know that we did do a fair amount of investment already from the board. And so if we're looking at cosmetic changes, which is what a lot of the commentary is, but also along policy, around safety, around entryways, around, how students are handled, with various levels of dignity or expectation, there may very well, just from a full disclosure standpoint in the community, they may very well need to have additional investment from a dollar and budget standpoint in the facility at Pulaski. And that brings up another equity issue, right? So we also have now, because of the fact that we have a co-located building, we have an expectation for equity, which is appropriate, absolutely appropriate. But we also have other buildings that have deferred maintenance and a lot of other problems. And since we're in a budget cycle and we're doing budget proposals, I also just want to note that there is a larger equity issue between other buildings then, right? That we're now creating or looking at facilities. So for what it's worth, I just wanted to be sure from a transparency standpoint that we are speaking the same language around equity, because it's policy as well as facilities, and there may be budgetary impact that should come forth later, I'm guessing.
We are talking about this contract, right? Okay, I just want to make sure that. Is there any other additional comments? Could the board clerk please state what the resolution going forward is?
On Director Baez's motion, which moves approval of a 2-year lease with Carmen High School of Science and Technology, Inc. at the Casimir Pulaski High School campus, consistent with the Carmen Schools Charter School contract.
And that is with the understanding that some language will have to be changed in the contract itself. For example, instead of saying 2022, it'll have to say 2021. Okay. Okay, I'll call the roll.
On the motion by Director Baez, as read, seconded.
Could I raise one issue in addition, please?
Go ahead.
With the understanding that once we implement the committee, that there can be amendments to the contracts and to the lease.
Is that an understanding of what we can do with all contracts?
Mr. Chair, members of the board does have the discretion to call for amendments to contract. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Call the roll, please.
On the motion by Director Baez, seconded by Director Harris, as read. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Fall. I'm sorry. Director Harris.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Voss.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
Director Miller.
Aye.
Chair Fall.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes. The motion passes.
Gavel goes back to the chair, Miller.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item that was set aside is item 11 of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, action on a request to approve the Second Amendment to extend the lease agreement with Carmen High School of Science and Technology at the Walker campus located at 1712 South 32nd Street. This item has been forwarded to the board as it was forwarded without recommendation.
Dr. Posley, would you like to comment?
Yes, Chair Miller, members of the committee, we would like to suggest that for the proposed lease at the Walker site that we, with the current lease that we have, stay in place, continue until it expire on June 30th of 2019. We would like to suggest that the proposed lease going forward for the site not designated to either party located in the building to use room 11 to allow a thorough space study and to be conducted at the Walker site, and final recommendations to be shared with the school community and the board. We would like to move forward with a 2-year lease at the site beginning July 1st of 2019 for the Walker site, and the recommendation is to revise the lease to allow for a space study to be conducted to further consider space allocations for the building. This will require neither occupant to be assigned to room 11 for the purpose of this item, and prior to July 1st of 2019. We expect to have expert guidance on the space allotment. We are prepared to answer any questions that you may have in regards to this item.
Board members, Director Voss.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I just want to clarify then, what happens in the meantime while you're doing the space study? Because it's my understanding that Carmen has been using that room for a few years, although they haven't been paying for it on their lease, as I understand it. And so I just don't want a situation where there's disruption to any of our students with respect to the services that are being provided or not provided, and that the room is just shut down and no one's using it if that's not serving our children. So what happens in the meantime in terms of your proposed solution?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, members of the board, I want to be sure that that there is a correct understanding of what is being proposed to the board at this time. The administration's recommendation is approval of the proposed Second Amendment to the lease agreement for a 3-year term to align with the charter school contract for Carmen. However, any modifications to that would need to be made by the board, as this is the administration's recommendation. And from what I'm understanding, Dr. Posley is proposing other things that would happen in addition to this recommendation.
Understood? Okay. Dr. Posey, did you have comment in response?
Chair Miller, members of the committee, in respect to room 11, Carmen will continue to occupy room 11 until the end of the school year.
Director Falk?
So we need a motion, right? Correct. We need a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation with 2 changes. Change number 1 is to change this from a 3-year contract to a 2-year contract. And number 2, and you might want to help me out with the wording of this, is to add an addendum to this that room 11 is not assigned any well, because it's only a Carmen contract, to Carmen until there is an evaluation of what to do with that room. Is that the essence of what's going on here?
Chair Miller, members of the committee, yes. However, Carmen will maintain the room until the end of this school year.
Yeah, but this is for the
next
new,
school year,
this is the new contract.
No one will be
Yeah.
assigned to that space until a space study is conducted.
Yeah, the present contract still is in place. So this is only on the new contract anyway.
Okay. Do you have a motion?
Yeah, the motion, I think I did state, I think we'll need a second, is that we change it from a 3-year, approve the superintendent's recommendation, change it with the modification, we change it from a 3-year contract to a 2-year contract, and that room 11 will not be assigned to Carmen until there is an evaluation what to do with that room.
I would suggest that the wording not be assigned
Okay.
until.
Determination of what to do with the room.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Given that currently the school is using the room and has a lease through the end of the school year, use for the current space is already addressed relative to Carmen being able to use the room until room 11. However, the new lease that is before you indicates that that room is unassigned. So it would be duplicative to put it in the motion, and it's already in the actual lease. So if I'm understanding the conversation, it would be to approve a 2-year lease with Carmen High School of Science and Technology at the Walker campus and authorize the administration to conduct a space allocation study within the Walker campus.
Do we have a second to this?
Second.
Director Voss seconded. Director Phillips.
Yes, thank you, Chair Miller. So I just wanted clarity from administration. This building used to have 3 schools. It currently has 2. In terms of room 11, it wasn't officially assigned to either school building through a lease or a contract. Is that correct?
Chair Miller, members of the committee, in the Walker complex, we have a unique situation where we had a school by the name of Supar that was there. Elba was there and Walker. And so the room that's in question was a room that was assigned to Supar. And if it was a situation where we had 2 separate schools in the building, automatically that room would have went to the other school. However, in this situation, that room was assigned. And over time, we have had an understanding, a letter that was addressing this particular room and this particular concept. And that room was assigned at that particular time to Carmen. However, we had an opportunity to take this letter and work with the city attorney on this particular letter. And one of the rulings that we received was the idea that this, was that particular year agreement. We also had another letter that happened in 2017 that stated that, from one of the regionals as well, that stated that each one of the schools should maintain the space that they had in their current agreements. And so in which that's when Kerman was still assigned to room 11. And so what we're doing now is trying to make sure that we do a space study to make sure that we have this, get a full understanding of what's happening and be able to report back to the school community as well as to the board.
Thank you.
Follow-up?
That answers my
Okay.
question.
All right. Yeah, Director Bias.
Yeah, I had a question for Madam Clerk, because I think that your motion captures, your proposed language for the motion captures what's going on here. I thought that room 11 is an MPS space. It doesn't have to do with the lease, okay? So therefore, what we're talking about is really reducing the lease to 2 years as a function of the contract, so it's consistent with the contract. But the matter of what happens with room 11 is a separate matter. It's not related to the lease. The lease basically continues, but the administration now has to proceed with an analysis of what to do in that situation and then come back at some point to this board, or maybe not, okay? Maybe not, because it's a matter of the utilization of space by the administration. But I think that given the sentiment and what you heard here, you may want to share that with the board at some point. But I'm wondering if we should just have a motion on the issue before us, which is the lease, and bringing the lease down to 2 years, and then the administration proceeding with the understanding that we have heard.
Down to
that-
2 years,
yeah,
you said.
mhm, yeah.
I understood you to say 3 just.
No, 2, bring it down to 2 years, right?
Madam Clerk, I'm of the sense that what Director Baez is saying is actually the case.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, that is the exact motion that was made by Director Falk, seconded by Director Voss.
Okay. I think we're good then, Director Baez. I think we're good.
That wasn't what happened at the beginning. But that's what-
No, it wasn't at the beginning. Yeah, that's correct. It was not at the beginning. Did you, Dr. Posey, did you have any thoughts?
Chair Miller, members of the committee, by all means, we will be back before the board to share our findings before July's board meeting.
Okay, not seeing any other comments, please call the roll.
On Director Falk's motion, seconded by Director Voss, moving approval of a 2-year lease with the Carmen High School of Science and Technology at the Walker campus, and authorize the administration to conduct a space allocation study within the Walker campus. On the motion as read. Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Falk.
Aye.
Director Harris.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Voss.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
Chair Miller.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item set aside is item 12 of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Action on a request to approve the Second Amendment to extend the lease agreement with Carmen High School of Science and Technology at the Northwest Secondary School building located at 5496 North 72nd Street. This item was set aside as it was forwarded to the board without recommendation.
Would the administration wish to comment?
Vice President Miller, members of the committee, we are recommending a 3-year lease of this Northwest building. We're ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Director Falk.
I move the recommendation of the administration with the change of from 3 years to 2 years, ending in 2021.
Second.
And we have a second. Comments by board members? Not seeing any. Please call the roll.
On Director Falk's motion, seconded by Director Harris, to approve a 2-year lease with the Carmen High School of Science and Technology at the Northwest Secondary School building for the term consistent with the charter school contract.
Right.
Please call the roll.
Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Falk.
Aye.
Director Harris.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Voss.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
Chair Miller.
Aye.
At 7 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what was the next item that was set aside?
Mr. Chair, as we have dispensed,
Yes, what was Director Woodward's, how did you vote?
Did you hear how I vote?
I believe she said no.
Did you hear what I said?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, before we start the next item, we have been asked for clarity on the vote, and I believe that the vote is 7 ayes. The motion passed.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I heard.
In clarifying,
Yes.
all board members present voted aye. If I am incorrect, we can definitely correct the record at this point.
She need to hear it, got you.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, what is the next item to be set aside?
Mr. Chair, as we have dispensed with the item relative to the Carmen Charter School contract, the next item before you is item 3 of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. Action on an instrumentality charter school petition for the Green Tree Preparatory Academy, GPA. This item was set aside as it was forwarded to the board without recommendation, with instruction that the Charter School Review Panel bring its recommendation directly to the board.
Does the administration wish to make comments?
Mr. Chair, the Office of Board Governance has submitted the Charter School Panel's recommendation, which is to contract with the GPA school for a term of 5 years.
Thank you. I had called on the administration, but I guess I was supposed to call on board governance. Would you, Dr. Posey, would you like to make any comments?
Chair Miller, members of the committee, we are excited about this charter that's coming forward before you, and please support our item.
Okay, board members, do we have any thoughts? Yes, Director Falk.
I move approval of the recommendation.
Second.
Any comments? Thoughts?
Comments?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, just to get clarity on Director Falk's motion, the recommendation is that the board determine how it wishes to proceed. I'm assuming Director Falk is following
To approve
the recommendation of the Charter School Review Panel?
yes, to approve.
So noted. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, and it was seconded by Director Harris. Correct?
Yes, it was, sir.
Okay, any comments?
Director Harris, jump in. I was in the committee, but that's okay.
You got the next one.
Okay. It's okay. No, I just wanted to say that hearing the presentation of the school, the day that Director Falk and I were in the committee, with the other members of the panel, we were convinced that this is a very viable possibility, that this can get us to the point where instrumentality charters in this district take on the kind of life that we've been talking about, that they help us transform some of the learning that happens in schools and in the community. There were a number of suggestions and recommendations during our discussion, and I'm hoping that those suggestions and recommendations get to the school staff because it seems to me that we need to work together to make that school stronger and to ensure that it has the success that the model promises will come as the result of your work. So I want to support the resolution, and I want to support the work of the school.
Thank you. Any other comments? Not seeing any. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Falk's motion, seconded by Director Harris, for approval of the charter school contract with the on approval of the charter school petition for 5 years with the Green Tree Preparatory Academy, and to authorize the Office of Board Governance and the administration in consultation with the city attorney to negotiate a charter school contract and bring that back to the board.
Thank you.
On the
Very
motion
good.
as read, Director Baez.
Aye.
Director Falk.
Aye.
Director Harris.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Voss.
Aye.
Director Woodward.
Aye.
Chair Miller.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what is the next item that was set aside?
Mr. Chair, that was the last item that was set aside.
Are there any items of regular business?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have 3 items of regular business. Item 1 is the report of the board's delegates. The first report is that of the board's delegate to the Title I District Advisory Council, DAC.
Dr. Phillips, do you have anything to report?
Thank you, Vice President Miller, for the promotion to doctor. I have nothing, the report is before you, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Madam Secretary, what is our next report?
The next report is that of the board's delegate to the Milwaukee Public Library Board.
The report is attached. Please contact President Sane with any questions of the report. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the board's delegate to the Head Start Policy Council.
Dr. Harris.
Mr. Chairman, the report is before you, and if you have any questions, please refer them to Director Harris and the Board of Governance.
Yeah, I just have to say that Director Phillips and Director Harris are worthy of being, of having a doctorate before their names, but I spoke too soon. Madam Secretary, what is the next item of regular business?
The next item of regular business is the monthly report of the president of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
The report is attached. Please contact President Sane with any questions of the report. Madam Secretary, are there any items of new business for referral?
Mr. Chair, we have no items of new business for referral.
Madam Secretary, are there any communications for referral to committee?
We have no communications for referral.
Are there any resolutions for referral to committee?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have 5 resolutions for referral. The first resolution is Resolution 1819R-12 by Director Woodward regarding a monthly regional report.
That will be referred to the Committee on Parental and Community Engagement. What is the next resolution?
The next resolution is Resolution 1819R-13 by Director Phillips regarding inclement weather guidelines.
This will be referred to the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies. Excuse me?
Mr. Chair, just for the record, President Sane is also a co-sponsor on that resolution.
Okay. That'll be referred to Legislation, Rules, and Policies. Madam Secretary, what's the next resolution?
The next resolution is 1819R-14 by Director Phillips regarding appointment of school leaders.
That'll be referred to the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel.
I will be a co-signer over.
Okay, and
And,
we will note that Director Woodward is a co-sponsor.
Director Woodward is a co-sponsor. And what's the next resolution, Madam Secretary?
The next resolution is 1819R-15 by Director Harris regarding a shared facilities partnership.
That'll be referred to the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Madam Secretary, what is the next resolution?
The last resolution is Resolution 1819R-16 by Director Phillips regarding commemorative observances.
That'll be referred to the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. Chair, that was the last item on this meeting's agenda.
There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned.